Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to today's episode of The Fishing Teacher, and really appreciate you guys coming by to watch the video. Always appreciate that. And guys, today we're going to be giving some tips and advice on how to correctly adjust the drag on your bait cast reel. I think a lot of people, they either adjust it too light or too heavy sometimes. So we're going to give you guys some good juice on talking about different lure categories and different type of lures and line and how you need to adjust your drag accordingly to really maximize your efficiency out there. Also, guys, just a quick invitation. I'd just like to invite everybody to please consider subscribing here to The Fishing Teacher. It's free and easy to do that. And also check out our membership options we have on the YouTube homepage of The Fishing Teacher if you guys are interested in that. Okay, guys, star drags on bait cast reels here. These are here for a reason, but there's a lot to this. There's a lot of different considerations to take to consider before you actually adjust one, depending upon the lure and the line you're going to use. And also, guys, real quick plug here. If you guys are looking for a really good bait cast reel, these are the ones. I got these Okuma HA1000s from Tackle Warehouse here. I've really been happy with them. They're a good solid reel at a good price. I'll put my Tackle Warehouse link in the description for this Okuma reel. If you guys are looking to pick up a bait cast reel, I think you'd really be happy with it. But anyway, back to the drag system here. Let's talk a little bit about that. The key on adjusting your drag, it has to do with the lure category that you're throwing, the pound test line, and the size of fish that you're fishing for. And so we're going to talk about a lot of different situations. Now, first of all, let's talk about when you want to have your drag set pretty light on a particular lure. Anytime that you're throwing a crankbait, you need to have a lighter line because, or a jerkbait, crankbait, or any type of a treble hook lure, even a topwater lure to some extent. Because when you fish a topwater bait, a lot of times those fish are hooked by like one barb. And sometimes the hooks on crankbaits are they're wire hooks and they bend a little bit. So just the fact that you're dealing with a treble hook that's got a smaller diameter, it's not as big a diameter as a single hook usually, and you're using some lighter lines sometimes, that's when I like to adjust my drag a little bit lighter. So what I want to do is I want to adjust the tension on my star drag to the point where, say, for example, if I get a 2 or 3 pound bass and that fish makes a run, as a safety mechanism, I want to make sure that that drag slips so that the hook doesn't pull out. But before I get into anything further, let me give you one good piece of advice here. A drag should only be your insurance. What you really want to do on a bait cast reel, anytime you're fighting a fish, is you want to push the thumb bar here anytime a fish makes a run, and that way you can spool and you can put exactly the amount of tension you need to on that fish. So say, for example, you get a good fish on a crankbait, a 6 or 7 pound bass on the crankbait, and you see that fish jump out there and you know that fish is getting ready to make a run. You don't really know how your drag is going to perform or how that fish is hooked. So the best thing you can do is when you're fighting that fish and you know that fish is starting to take a run, push your thumb bar in, put pressure on the line there, and lessen the pressure. Let that fish have line if it wants it, and you can really put as much or as little tension on your line by thumbing it as you want to or don't want to. So I use a drag only as an insurance, but nevertheless it's still there because sometimes those fish will move so fast that you don't even have time to push that button. And sometimes if that fish moves real quick and puts tension on there, it locks that button down on a bait cast reel and you can't really push it until you take that tension off. So that's why you have to have your drag adjusted in correlation with spooling it like that. So, anytime you're using a crankbait or, treble hook lure, make sure your drag is a little bit looser, so it'll slip quite a bit easier. Now, as your lure categories get different and your line size gets different, say, for example, you're using a single hook like a jig or chatterbait or spinnerbait that has a larger diameter hook on it, and normally associated with those baits, you have heavier line. You're usually using over 15 pound test line. That's when you can go a little bit tighter on the drag because on some of those baits like that, once you do get a hook in them and you got heavier line on there, unless that fish is super, super big, you're probably going to need a drag. Most of the time, I have found if you have a fish that's under 4 pounds and you've got some type of a situation where you got 15 pound test or heavier and a single hook lure, you don't really need that drag. But if you do happen to get like a 6 or 7 or 8 pounder, you definitely will need a drag. I'll tell you guys one story. The biggest bass I ever caught in a tournament was 9 pounds, 14 ounces down at Sam Rayburn Lake in a Bassmaster tournament. and I was flipping stick with 30-pound line, and I had my drag pretty tight, and that 914, it stripped drag out of my reel before I could even push that thumb button, and it took out probably 20 feet of line with that drag before I could turn it. So it's definitely, it's definitely going to happen sometimes. Another consideration as far as how tight you set your drag, it has to do with how you set the hook on the lure category you're using. If you're fishing a lure like a jig or a worm or something that you actually have to reel down and set the hook with, you need to have it a little bit tighter, because what happens, let's say I'm fishing a plastic worm with 17-pound line. I make a cast out there. If my drag's too light, when I set the hook, that drag is going to slip and I'm not going to get the penetration in my hook. So if you're fishing a type of lure category, where, like a football head jig or something, where you're reeling down and setting the hook with some force, you need to have that drag a little bit tighter so your line doesn't slip. And then if you do have it tighter, it's really critical to make sure that you're very aware about pushing your thumb bar or dialing back on your drag once you do have that fish hooked. But the main thing, guys, is just using a little bit of common sense as far as how much pressure you can put on a fish versus the line size that you're using and the type of hook that you're using. And, in general, the lighter the line, the smaller the hook, the lighter the drag, the heavier the line, the heavier the hook, the tighter the drag. So that's just a little quick piece of advice there. Hope it helps you guys out, and we'll talk later.